Like an ooey-gooey hot pocket of diplomacy, countries have been using secret microwave technology to cook the hell out of one another's diplomats for decades. And tomorrow, 60 Minutes will be broadcasting an expose of these incidents being perpetuated by mysterious foreign adversaries. But not before I do it first and actually tell you the truth. The media is now calling these anomalous health incidents, formerly Havana Syndrome, but both those terms are bullshit meant to hide the truth. You see, what the media is pretending is a new phenomenon isn't. In fact, I'm going to show you some once classified intelligence documents talking about similar attacks that go back as far as the 1950s. In the early 1960s, an electronics technician at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow found some mysterious radiation that was being beamed directly at the embassy. And this kicked off some secret projects under the CIA, ARPA, and military intelligence to study what was going on. The top secret projects were named Project Pandora, Project Bizarre, Project Tums, Project Mutz, and Project Big Boy. And they sought out to find why the U.S. Embassy was being bombarded with microwave radiation and what effects it was having on the personnel, and why those personnel had the highest cancer rate in the world. This problem was being leaked to the public as early as this February 7th, 1976 article in the Los Angeles Times. Titled "The Russ Used Radiation Beams to Bug the American Embassy," it talks about how the U.S. ambassador had to make his team aware that there was a great risk for leukemia, cataract, psoriasis, skin cancer, and psychological effects, and that those effects were greatest in the pregnant wives of the staffers. To anybody that heard the blips in the news about the so-called Havana Syndrome, this should sound pretty familiar because it's the same thing. The media tries to downplay the Havana Syndrome effects, make them sound like they're just theoretical, but nothing could be further from the truth. In 1969, experts from around the world were invited to the Medical College of Virginia for a conference to talk about these effects. And there, Dr. Karel Marha of Czechoslovakia declared that microwave bioeffects included pain in the head and eyes, fatigue and overall weakness, dizziness and vertigo, poor night's sleep, irritability, fear, hypochondria, tension, depression, inhibition of intellectual functions, and decreased memory. And this was verified in the U.S. Navy's Project Big Boy, where they took a portion of the personnel on a ship, bombarded them with microwaves, kept the rest of the ship as a control group, and they monitored the health and psychological effects of what happened to the people getting bombarded with the microwaves. And they found a host of negative psychological and cognitive effects in people that were under the influence of the technology. And these people became much more susceptible to negative programming or influence. Now, interestingly, the bombardment of the U.S. Embassy was said to have started as early as 1953. And meanwhile, halfway around the world, in the Korean conflict, POWs and soldiers were coming back reporting that they had been under the influence of similar devices. And one of these devices was the Russian Leda machine that was studied by Dr. Ross 80. And what the POWs were reporting is that they were put under the influence of this machine to write false statements, and that they had no desire to withstand that kind of programming, that they became lethargic and zombie-like. These devices are classified as electrosleep devices in Russian literature. Now, when this technology made it over to the United States, it was seeded out into the military and then into private industry to do testing on people. And it transformed into things like HemiSync. When Bob Monroe got his patent on HemiSync, it was classified as a method for inducing sleep. Brainwashing. You see, if the government or military gives money to a private organization to do testing on the public, then there's no oversight and no liability for them. When these POWs who were under brainwashing were brought back in, they were studied extensively and given psychological treatment, but not necessarily to make them better. One of the earliest doctors that was working with this population was none other than Dr. Lewis Jolyon West of the CIA, infamous for his key role in MKUltra. And he definitely got some ideas from these unfortunate victims which he used in his own experiments. Jolly West had a protege that worked with him on these veterans at the CIA. And that person was none other than Dr. Christopher Kit Green. If you're familiar with my earlier videos, you might remember Dr. Green as the CAA spook scientist who runs around doing brain scans on people who have had anomalous experiences and UFO encounters, like my friend Chris, who was the guard at Skinwalker Ranch and has lasting health problems because of it, and Thomas Winterton, who had anomalous head trauma from his time at Skinwalker Ranch. Now, Winterton was studied by Dr. Gary Nolan, and Gary Nolan let the cat out of the bag that it was a state actor that actually did that and not a skinwalker. And Dr. Green is all involved with all this. In fact, he's been the ringleader for so much of it for decades. And as I mentioned, Dr. Green is in cahoots with Dr. Gary Nolan studying the UFO phenomena and these mysterious illnesses from the phenomena they're calling interference syndrome, which may as well just be Havana syndrome, which may as well just be the Moscow signal syndrome. It's almost like all this paranormal stuff and skinwalkers and psychic phenomena, ESP and UFOs are being used as a blind to cover up the testing of electromagnetic weaponry and non-lethal weapons. And let's not forget the old rub that they're only non-lethal weapons today. 5 years down the road when you've got brain damage or leukemia, well, that's another story. The tie-in with UFOs goes all the way back to Dr. Andrea Puharish, who, like Jolyon West, was an MK Ultra scientist. Puharish was an expert in electromagnetic mind control, having patented several devices. He was the person who discovered and popularized psilocybin mushrooms. He was the mentor of Bob Monroe before Monroe started the Monroe Institute and did all his gateway crap. And he was doing a ton of human experimentation, programming his space kids, his star kids, with hypnosis under the guise of trying to awaken their ESP and psychic ability, but that was just a cover for him trying to create multiple personalities to program. Puharish was a real creep, but he knew what was going on behind the scenes. And before the end of his life, he wrote an amazing tell-all book that was never officially published. I have a copy of it here. And in Chapter 1, it says, "Global magnetic warfare is here." Chapter 7, Global Magnetic Mind Control is here. And this book details how Nikola Tesla's technology was taken, usurped, turned into mind control and weather modification and electromagnetic warfare technology, and how it's been covered up and hidden from you ever since. Puharish was close friends and colleagues with John Hayes Hammond Jr., who was one of Nikola Tesla's original protégés. A radar specialist, invented a lot of the radar technology used in World War II, and Puharish was working with Jr. to create electromagnetic mind control technology for the Army and Navy back in the era of World War II before the Russians ever got their hands on it, and Puharish knew the inside story of what was really going on with these technologies. If you'd like a copy of this book, I'm republishing it now, and you can do a pre-order on our website. When these attacks and the Russian woodpecker and Eugene frequency were at their height, Puharish was working with none other than Dr. Bob Beck to figure out what was being done to people's minds. If you've seen some of my earlier videos, Dr. Beck spoke at length about these. These are protective devices that were worn by diplomats in West Germany against these electromagnetic weapons. And this, my Halo Pulsar, is an updated and modernized version of this older technology. Beck and Puharish knew 50 years ago that there are technologies to protect you from these unseen influences. And Beck did an amazing video called Electromagnetic Ghostbusting that was never put on the internet before, until now. If you'd like to watch the full video for the first time on the internet, it's on my website. So I hope I've connected a few dots about Havana syndrome and given you a little bit of an education on it before the media gets a chance to lie to you. Microwaving the embassy. Like an ooey-gooey hot pocket of diplomacy, countries